the thing I like about this Peterson Forum is I know a lot of people think that we should have stopped talking about the deficit and the debt when the economy was down. Every time I have come here, I have said that you can't get rid of the deficit or balance the budget when interest rates are lower than inflation, because anything you cut back, you're liable to lose more. You can't do it by tax increases. You can't do it by spending cuts alone. You just can't. On the other hand, to pretend that there are no long-term demographic changes or healthcare drivers here is crazy. And I think that continuing to focus on things like this matters. And I think the effort that one of the things the Peterson Forum has done, and it's really important now because there's been a little spike in health spending this year, is it keeps us focused on these things that will shape the possibilities for America in the future.
And the other thing that I've been talking about in parallel tracks is the fact that our entitlement spending, and at the state level, that's pension, health benefits, and debt service. In my fiscal year 15 budget, that takes 94 cents of every new dollar. So when you talk about wanting to invest in higher education or K-12 education, if you talk about wanting to invest in infrastructure, that all has to come out of that 6 cents, and it's not sustainable. We need to do other things like tax reform and entitlement reform in this country to create opportunity for people to have a greater life than their parents have had. That's what I'm for.
Also in this book is a set of data which essentially demonstrates that when you have a significant, or any deficit, it crowds out essentially private fixed investment. That's what the data show, and I go on to describe internally why arithmetically that is what happens, and the correlations are very high. I mean, you can't get around them. You can't get around the facts.
Some of the motivation for people on the progressive end of the spectrum was, let's just get rid of the debt so we can get rid of the debt service, because you get absolutely nothing for that. It amounts to a tremendous amount of money. It's no investment, you get no return, and it's an opportunity cost for our investments in education, scientific research, and the rest. And so moving toward reducing the deficit is a priority for all of us in a fair and balanced way.
The short-term deficit outlook, we all know, is better. We are in a better place than where we were, obviously 2, 3, 5, 10 years ago. But where we have a challenge is in the long run. And the drivers of that long-run fiscal challenge is the cost of health care and interest. So interest is about making sure you manage your budget correctly. And what we all know, Democrats and Republicans alike will say, we have focused all of our attention cutting our discretionary funding, and we haven't looked at the other parts of our budget that have a huge impact, including a tax code and including entitlements. And both of those have to be addressed to deal with the long-term fiscal challenges that we have.
So if we're able to get to the point where we deal with those situations, the economic growth that everybody wants to see in this country can be transformational. But as long as we avoid it and continue just to avoid, we're going to be continuing to underperform, and we'll continue to see GDP quarters, struggling to stay above, just above the margin.
The notion is that the debt and deficit is no longer a big issue. It's not going to play in 2014, and It's all because the deficits have gone down a little bit. But the fact is that based on independent analysis, nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, we're looking at trillion-dollar deficits again within the next 10 years. So, one, 500 billion seems like an awfully big number to me. Our deficit this year is nothing to be proud of. But more importantly, as the baby boomers begin to retire, my generation, we're going to see these numbers escalate, and everybody knows that it's not a secret. So there shouldn't be any easing off of the political pressure on those of us who are elected to get something done up here. Instead, there should be a lot of focus in 2014. I hope there will be in these races around the country. It's a midterm, so there's no presidential election, but House races and Senate races. And people ought to be asked, you know, do you think this is a big issue, and what are you going to do about it? Because it does affect our economy today, and certainly it's unfair, even immoral, to do to future generations.